The Tale of the Wandering Tea Merchant. Once upon a time, in a world where the air carried the scent of 1,000 exotic spices, where rivers ran with golden honey and clouds brewed the softest mist, there lived a peculiar traveler known far and wide as Master Oolong, the Wandering Tea Merchant. Unlike other merchants who settled in bustling markets or quaint village squares, Master Oolong never stayed in one place for long. Instead, he traveled the world aboard his marvelous floating tea house, a grand wooden ship adorned with curling dragon motifs, glowing lanterns, and shelves upon shelves of the rarest teas known to humankind and perhaps even a few unknown to them. But Master Oolong did not merely sell tea. He granted wishes. The tea that knew your heart. It was said that those who stumbled upon the floating tea house, whether by chance or fate, would be served a tea unlike any other, a brew that revealed the deepest desires of their heart. Some claimed it could mend broken spirits, rekindle lost dreams, or even whisper forgotten secrets. Others believed it was merely a trick of the mind, a clever illusion crafted by an eccentric old man. But those who had tasted Master Oolong's tea knew the truth. And so, across deserts and mountains, through ancient cities and hidden valleys, the legend of the Wandering Tea Merchant grew, whispered in hushed voices over steaming cups of jasmine and oolong. The visitor with no name. One evening, as the floating tea house drifted atop the shimmering mirror lake, a visitor arrived unlike any before. A young woman stepped aboard, cloaked in midnight blue, her face hidden beneath a deep hood. She spoke no name, asked for no price, only sat at the counter where Master Oolong brewed his enchanted teas. "You have traveled far," the old merchant mused, selecting a delicate porcelain cup. "And yet your heart is heavier than your feet." The woman remained silent, watching as he poured a golden-hued tea that shimmered in the lantern light. "Drink," he said, sliding the cup toward her. "Let the tea tell your story." She hesitated, then lifted the cup to her lips. At once, the air around them changed. The floating tea house swayed, not with the gentle waves of the lake, but with something deeper, memories. Shapes rose from the mist curling off the tea, images of a grand palace, a silver crown, a throne left empty. Master Oolong's eyes twinkled. "Ah, so you were not merely a traveler. You are a lost queen." The woman stiffened, her hands tightening around the cup. "I do not wish to be found," she whispered. "Yet here you are, in a tea house that grants wishes," he replied. "Tell me, child, what is it that you truly seek?" The woman hesitated, then looked into her cup, where a single tea leaf floated, forming a delicate pattern. "A home," she admitted at last. "Not a kingdom, not a throne. Just a place where I may rest." Master Oolong smiled as if he had been waiting for those words. "Then drink and be at peace." A new dawn. As the first light of dawn touched the lake's surface, the floating tea house drifted away, carrying with it its enigmatic keeper and his endless collection of teas. And in a small, quiet village where the scent of jasmine lingered in the morning air, a woman awoke in a simple wooden cottage, the weight of a crown no longer upon her head. She never saw the floating tea house again. But each evening, as she sipped a warm cup of tea, she swore she could hear the distant chime of lanterns and the whisper of an old merchant's voice. The legend continues. And so, the Wandering Tea Merchant sailed on, across time and place, his floating tea house appearing wherever lost souls sought comfort, wherever weary travelers longed for rest. And if you are lucky, or in need, you too may one day find yourself stepping aboard, greeted by the scent of a tea brewed just for you.
The Rich Man and the Poor Man, A Friendship Beyond Gold. Chapter 1, Two Worlds, One Bond. In the bustling city of Belwyn, where towering mansions stood next to crumbling alleyways, two boys grew up in two very different worlds. Edwin Langford was the son of one of the wealthiest merchants in the city. He lived in a grand estate where chandeliers glittered, servants obeyed every command, and silk curtains billowed in windows that overlooked golden streets. Thomas "Tom" Everly was the son of a struggling blacksmith. His home was a one-room shack at the edge of the city, where the roof leaked when it rained, and the only warmth came from the forge his father worked tirelessly at. They had just enough to eat, but never enough to feel secure. Despite their differences, fate had a peculiar way of bringing them together. One afternoon, Edwin wandered into the city's lower districts out of curiosity. There, he met Tom, who was fixing an old wooden cart that had broken apart in the street. While others walked past without a glance, Edwin stopped and watched. "Need help?" Edwin asked. Tom looked up, surprised. "You? Help? With those fancy hands of yours?" Edwin grinned. Well, I don't know much about carts, but I can hold the wheels. That was the start of something neither of them could have expected. Chapter 2, Riches of the Heart. The friendship between Edwin and Tom grew over the years. They played in the streets, stole apples from the same market stall, and argued about everything from the best way to climb a fence to whether the sky was actually blue or just reflecting the sea. But as they got older, their differences became more obvious. Edwin had tutors, lavish clothes, and a future already planned for him. Tom had calloused hands, tattered shoes, and the weight of survival pressing on his shoulders. Still, they met whenever they could, sneaking out late at night to sit by the river, where the city lights shimmered on the water. Do you ever wonder what it'd be like if we switched lives? Tom asked one night, skipping a stone across the surface. Edwin smirked. You'd get bored in a week. Too many rules. Too many expectations. Tom chuckled. And you wouldn't last a day at the forge. You'd cry the moment you got a blister. I do not cry that easily. Edwin protested, though they both knew he did. Chapter 3, When the World Turned Against Them. As they reached adulthood, reality crept in. Tom's father grew sick, and with no money for medicine, his condition worsened. Meanwhile, Edwin's father wanted him to marry into another wealthy family to expand their business empire. You can't just let them decide for you, Tom said, frustrated, as they sat behind a tavern, sharing a loaf of stale bread. Marrying someone for money? That's madness. Edwin sighed. And what choice do I have? It's my duty. Your duty should be to yourself. Tom snapped. Not to your father's gold. Edwin looked away. And what about you? Your father's dying, and you're working yourself to the bone. When are you going to ask for help? Tom's pride flared. I don't need handouts. I'll figure it out. I always do. They argued, and for the first time, walked away angry. But fate, once again, had other plans. Chapter 4, The Price of Friendship. Tom's father passed away that winter. He had fought hard, but sickness does not care for strength or determination. Tom was left alone, with only debt and grief for company. Meanwhile, Edwin's father arranged his engagement to a woman he barely knew. The wedding was to be the grandest the city had ever seen. Tom, drowning in sorrow, didn't attend. Edwin noticed. And that was when he made the decision that changed everything. The night before the wedding, Edwin arrived at Tom's forge with a bag full of gold coins. Take it, he said simply. Tom shook his head. I told you, I don't need. Shut up for once, Edwin interrupted. This isn't charity. It's an investment. You fix things. You build things. Use this to start your own shop. And if you insist on being stubborn, pay me back when you can. Tom's hands trembled as he took the bag. Why are you doing this? Edwin grinned. Because you're my best friend, idiot. Chapter 5, A Future of Their Own Making. Edwin never attended his wedding. Instead, he left his father's fortune behind and disappeared from the city. Rumors spread that he had fled overseas, that he had shamed his family. But the truth was simpler. He had found a new home. With Tom. Using Edwin's gold and Tom's skills, they built a small but thriving blacksmith shop. Over time, they expanded, hiring apprentices, making weapons and tools, and creating a name for themselves, not as a rich man or a poor man, but as partners. Years later, on a warm summer evening, they sat outside their shop, drinking cheap ale and watching the stars. So, Tom said, grinning, you ever regret giving up the life of luxury? Edwin stretched his legs out, leaning back against the wall. Not once. Turns out, being rich isn't about gold. It's about having someone who's got your back. Tom raised his cup. To best friends? Edwin clinked his against Tom's. To best friends. And as they laughed under the night sky, neither of them cared about where they had come from. Only where they were going.
The Beggar and the Cat, a story of redemption and hope. Chapter 1, The Man with No Name. On the cold, grey streets of the city, among the forgotten faces that people hurried past, there sat a man who had once had a name, a life, and a dream. Now, all he had was a tattered coat, a thin blanket, and an old tin can that barely rattled with the few coins thrown in by the occasional kind stranger. Nobody looked at him. Nobody cared to ask how he ended up here. But he was used to it. Life had been cruel, stripping away everything he once held dear. He used to be someone, a man with a job, a home, and a future. But after losing his family in a tragic accident and falling into despair, he had lost everything: his will, his livelihood, and eventually, his place in society. Now, he was just another faceless figure on the street, wrapped in a coat that barely kept out the cold. And that was how he planned to live out his days. Forgotten. Until he met her. Chapter 2, A Small Shadow in the Night. It was late one winter evening, when the streets were nearly empty, that he first saw the small shadow creeping toward him. A cat! She was thin, her fur matted and dirty, her ribs visible beneath her patchy coat. She was a stray, just like him. At first, he ignored her. He had barely enough food for himself, how could he possibly take care of an animal? But the cat didn't leave. She curled up beside him on his worn-out blanket, shivering against the cold night air. He felt her tiny body tremble and, despite himself, he reached out and gently placed a corner of his coat over her. To his surprise, she didn't run away. Instead, she let out a soft, weak purr, a sound so fragile and trusting that something deep inside him cracked. For the first time in years, someone had chosen to stay with him. Chapter 3, A Silent Companion. The days that followed were the same. Every morning, when the city awoke, people passed them by, some offering change, most pretending they didn't exist. And through it all, the cat stayed. She never wandered too far, always curling up near him at night, waiting for him when he woke up. When he begged for food, he made sure to share a little with her, no matter how hungry he was. He even gave her a name, Whiskers. For the first time in a long while, he found himself talking again, not to people, but to the small creature who listened without judgment. "You're lucky, you know," he muttered one night, scratching behind her ears as she purred contentedly. "You don't have to worry about bills or rent or a life." She meowed in response, as if disagreeing. He laughed, a sound so unfamiliar to him that it almost startled him. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. Chapter 4, The First Act of Kindness. One rainy afternoon, as he sat in his usual spot with Whiskers curled up beside him, an old woman approached. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a sandwich. "For you and the cat," she said softly. He stared at her, unaccustomed to such generosity. Slowly, he took the sandwich, murmuring, "Thank you." It was the first time in years that someone had looked at him with kindness. And for the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar stir in his heart, hope. Chapter 5, The Accident. Winter grew colder. Whiskers had grown healthier under his care, but one night, she disappeared. Panic gripped him. He searched frantically through the streets, calling her name. Then, he saw her. A car had struck her. She lay motionless on the road, her small body barely breathing. Without thinking, he ran to her and scooped her up, his hands shaking. He had nothing. No money, no home. But he had to save her. So he did something he never thought he would. He walked into an animal clinic, head bowed in shame, and begged. "Please, help her." The receptionist hesitated, but then a kind-hearted vet stepped forward. "I'll take care of her," she said gently. He watched helplessly as they took Whiskers away, fear twisting inside him. Would she survive? Would she forgive him for not protecting her? Chapter 6, The Second Chance. Whiskers survived. And something unexpected happened. The vet, noticing the way he cared for the cat despite having nothing, asked him about his life. He told her everything, the loss, the streets, the hopelessness. She listened. And then she made an offer. "I know a shelter that can help you," she said. "A place where you can get back on your feet. You don't have to live like this forever." He hesitated. Could he really have another chance? He looked at Whiskers, who was recovering in a small cage, watching him with trusting green eyes. She had fought to survive. Maybe he could, too. Chapter 7, A New Beginning. It wasn't easy. The road to rebuilding a life was long and difficult. But with the help of the shelter, he found work. He started as a janitor at the vet clinic, the same clinic that saved Whiskers. It wasn't much, but it was something. He had a roof over his head, food in his stomach, and most importantly, he had Whiskers by his side. Months passed, and people started seeing him differently. No longer as a faceless beggar, but as a man with a story. A man with a future. Chapter 8, The Full Circle. 1 year later, he stood outside the same cafe where the old woman had once given him a sandwich. This time, he wasn't the one begging. This time, he was the one offering a meal to another lost soul sitting in the cold. And beside him, Whiskers purred, as if telling him, "You've come a long way." He had. Because in the end, it wasn't just Whiskers who had been saved. It was him, too. Epilogue. A man who was once invisible had found a reason to live. And all it took was the love of a small, stray cat. The Celestial Odyssey, Tales of a Multiplanetary Humanity. Once upon a time, in an age beyond our present imagination, humanity had unlocked the doors to the stars. The Earth was no longer our only home. Over centuries, through technological marvels, daring expeditions, and the insatiable curiosity of explorers, mankind had spread across the vast ocean of space, settling on different planets. Each world was unique, brimming with wonders and challenges that shaped the very fabric of civilization. The dawn of the Exodus. The great exodus from Earth was not a sudden event but a gradual unfolding of destiny. As the home planet became overcrowded and resources dwindled, humankind turned its gaze outward. The first to be settled were the near planets, Mars, Europa, Titan, but these were mere stepping stones for the greater journey beyond the solar system. With the invention of the quantum warp drive, interstellar travel became possible, and with it, the boundless expansion of human civilization. The galactic frontier was no utopia, however. Each world had its own challenges. Harsh climates, alien ecosystems, gravitational anomalies, every planet demanded adaptation. But humans were nothing if not resilient. 2. The Planet of Eternal Twilight, NYX-9. NYX-9 was a world unlike any other. It revolved around a dying sun, a dim red dwarf, casting an eerie, everlasting twilight across its surface. Here, the settlers learned to live in a world of shadows, their cities built beneath vast glass domes that harvested what little light they could. Bioluminescent flora and fauna flourished, providing the only sources of natural light in the dark forests that covered much of the landscape. Among the settlers was Lyra Wren, a scientist obsessed with the whispers of the planet. Legend spoke of a sentient mist that roamed the forests, guiding the lost and sometimes stealing them away. One night, as she ventured into the wilderness in search of rare specimens, she saw it, an ethereal glow moving between the trees. She followed, her heart pounding, and the mist enveloped her. When she emerged, she was not the same. She had seen something that changed her forever. But what she had witnessed, she could not put into words. 3. The Sky Oceans of Oris Prime. Oris Prime was a gas giant with floating cities that drifted among its colossal storm clouds. Giant creatures resembling luminous manta rays soared through the dense atmosphere, their glowing bodies lighting the eternal dusk. Humanity had learned to coexist with these creatures, and the sky-faring Orishians had even developed a means of communicating with them, forming a bond that defied explanation. Captain Aidan Vaughan, a skyfarer, piloted his ship through the high winds, seeking the legendary Leviathan, a being said to be the guardian of Oris Prime. For years, the Leviathan had remained unseen, but now the storms grew fiercer, and some believed the creature was waking. Aidan and his crew braved the tempests, their sails catching the roaring gales. And then, from the abyss of the storm clouds, two luminous eyes as vast as mountains opened. The Leviathan had come. For the ice labyrinth of Zephyria. On Zephyria, a frozen planet locked in eternal winter, the settlers built their homes within immense glacier, carving out luminous ice tunnels. Legends told of an ancient civilization that had once thrived beneath the ice, their ruins lost to time. Aria Sunright, an archaeologist, had spent her entire career searching for them. One day, deep beneath the ice sheets, she uncovered a doorway, a towering monolith, pulsing with an unknown energy. As she activated its mechanisms, the ice trembled, revealing an underground city encased in crystalline frost. But the city was not abandoned. Something had been waiting, watching, for millennia. The living world of Silver. Silver was not just a planet, it was alive. The entire biosphere was interconnected, a vast, sentient intelligence that pulsed beneath the roots of its colossal trees. The settlers who lived here were not merely inhabitants but guests, bound by the ancient agreements of harmony. Among them was Aidan, a botanist who discovered a peculiar flower that bloomed once every 100 years. As he studied it, he felt whispers in his mind, not words, but emotions, memories not his own. The planet was speaking to him, revealing the secrets of its endless wisdom. But with knowledge came responsibility. The world had chosen him, and with that choice, his life would never be the same. 6. The War Beyond the Stars. As humanity flourished across these planets, so too did the shadows of conflict. Not all settlers sought peace. Some saw domination, control, the right to rule entire worlds. Factions rose, clashing over territory, resources, and ideology. The Stellar Dominion, a military force spanning multiple star systems, sought to unify humanity under a single rule, while the free colonies resisted, each world yearning to maintain its independence. Commander Lysander of the Dominion stood upon the bridge of his warship, gazing at the distant glow of a rebel world. Would unity come through conquest, or was there another way? Could humanity survive if it remained divided? These were the questions that would determine the fate of the stars. 7. The Journey Beyond. Even as the wars raged, explorers sought the next frontier. The whispers of an uncharted sector beyond the known galaxy grew louder. They spoke of the Gateway, a colossal structure floating in the void, older than any known civilization. Some believed it was a portal to another galaxy. Others thought it was a remnant of an ancient race. Captain Serena Vallin, aboard the Eclipse, led the expedition. As they neared the gateway, its ancient runes flickered to life. A choice lay before them: step through and embrace the unknown, or turn back and remain bound to what was familiar. With a deep breath, Serena gave the order. The ship moved forward, swallowed by the light. And with that step, humanity's greatest chapter had only just begun. Thus, the saga of multiplanetary humanity continues, each world offering a different tale, a different destiny. As long as the stars shine, there will always be new horizons to explore, mysteries to unravel, and stories to be told. And perhaps, one day, we too shall walk among them, writing the next chapter of the Celestial Odyssey. The Ocean's Eternal Dream, the tale of Princess Narina. The kingdom beneath the waves. Deep beneath the cerulean expanse of the endless sea, where the sunlight could no longer reach, lay the legendary kingdom of Pelagia. A city of wonder, its towers shimmered like pearls, and its streets wove between forests of coral. This was a realm where magic and mystery intertwined, and at its heart lived Princess Narina, the daughter of the Ocean King, ruler of the Abyssal Throne. Narina was unlike any other in the kingdom. While her people embraced the deep, content with their oceanic paradise, she longed to understand the world beyond the waves. Legends told of lands kissed by the sun, where creatures walked upon two legs, and rivers ran like the veins of the earth. Her curiosity was insatiable, yet the laws of Pelagia were strict. No merfolk were to interact with the world above. But destiny, as it often does, had different plans for her. 2. The forbidden call of the surface. On the eve of her 18th tide cycle, the great festival of Tidesong was held in her honor. Songs of the sea resonated through the currents, and schools of luminous fish danced in the water. Yet, amidst the revelry, Narina felt a longing that tugged at her heart. It was then that she heard it, a melody, distant and haunting, calling from above. Guided by the song, she swam past the coral reefs and past the ruins of the lost isles until she reached the surface. There, for the first time, she beheld the world of air. Above her, the sky stretched endlessly, and the moon bathed the ocean in silver. But it was not the sky that took her breath away, it was the voice that had called her. On a ship drifting upon the waves, a lone figure stood, Prince Elias of the Solarian Empire. He was not like the beings of the deep, his legs stood firm upon the wooden deck, and his golden hair caught the moonlight like woven sunbeams. He sang a song of longing, a ballad to the sea, unaware that it had reached the ears of one who was not meant to listen. In that moment, Narina felt something shift within her. A yearning not just for the world above, but for him. 3. A pact with the sea witch. Love, however, is never simple, especially for those who belong to different worlds. The laws of Pelagia were unyielding, and her father, the Ocean King, forbade any further interaction with the land dwellers. But Narina could not forget Elias, nor could she silence the ache in her heart. Desperate, she turned to the one being who could grant her wish, the sea witch, Morwenna. Morwenna lived in the Trench of Shadows, a place feared by all who knew of it. Her power was ancient, drawn from the darkness of the abyss. When Narina arrived at her lair, the witch smiled, as though she had been expecting her. "I can give you legs," Morwenna purred. "But everything has a price." Narina knew the tales of the sea witch's bargains. She braced herself for the worst. "Your voice," Morwenna whispered. "That is the price. Your song will be mine, and you shall walk the land." To be with Elias, to see the world above, it was all she had ever wanted. And so, she agreed. With a whispered spell, Morwenna bound Narina's voice into a seashell and pressed it to her lips. A burning pain spread through her throat, and darkness took her vision. When she awoke, she was no longer in the water. 4. The Kingdom of Men. Narina awoke upon the shore, the sand warm beneath her fingers. She had legs, fragile, trembling things that ached as she stood. Above her, the sun shone brightly, and in the distance, the towers of a grand kingdom rose. Elias found her there, his heart struck by the mysterious girl who had appeared as if from nowhere. Though she could not speak, he was captivated by her presence. He brought her to the palace, where she was dressed in fine silks and adorned with jewels. Yet, despite the splendor, she felt hollow without her voice. Days passed, and Narina and Elias grew close. He taught her to dance beneath the chandeliers, to wander through gardens filled with roses. She laughed silently at his stories, and though she could not reply, he seemed to understand her heart. But the sea was restless. The bargain had been made, and Morwenna's magic had consequences. Without her song, the ocean called for Narina's return. Each night, the waves whispered her name, and the tides crept ever closer to reclaim her. And in the depths, Morwenna watched, smiling. The price of love. The truth came to light on the night of the grand ball, when Elias was to choose his bride. Narina, dressed in a gown that shimmered like the ocean, longed to tell him the truth, to sing of her love. But without her voice, she was helpless. It was then that Morwenna struck. Rising from the waters, the sea witch arrived in human form, holding Narina's seashell in her hand. With a cruel smile, she shattered it. Narina's voice was set free, and with it, the spell unraveled. Her legs melted away, and she fell to the floor as water pooled around her. The court gasped in horror as they saw the truth: she was not of their world. Elias ran to her, unbothered by her form, for he had already known her heart. He reached for her, but the sea had claimed its own. With one final whisper, Narina was drawn back to the depths, her form dissolving into the waves. 6. the Song of the Ocean. In the years that followed, the legend of the Sea Princess was told across the land. Some said she had become a spirit of the waves, forever watching over the one she loved. Others claimed she had risen again, now a queen beneath the ocean. But on stormy nights, when the wind howled and the sea raged, sailors swore they could hear a song, a melody of longing and love, carried by the tide. And Elias, now a king, stood upon the shore, always listening, always waiting. For the ocean never forgets. The Lonely Scarecrow, a tale of time and friendship. The forgotten field. At the edge of a vast, golden wheat field, where the wind whispered secrets to the ears of time, stood an old scarecrow. His body was woven from dried straw, his clothes tattered by years of sun and storm, and his face painted with a gentle smile that had long since faded. He had no name, no voice, no movement, only a purpose, to guard the fields from crows. Yet, despite his duty, he had never truly scared a single crow. The birds knew he was harmless, just a figure trapped in place, condemned to an eternity of watching the changing seasons with silent longing. His only company was the rustling of the wheat, the cool caress of the breeze, and the moonlight that bathed him in silver each night. But the scarecrow had a heart, an unseen, unheard heart that ached for something more. He had watched the farmers' children run through the fields, their laughter echoing in his empty world. He had seen lovers walk hand in hand, sharing whispers of forever. And he had witnessed time march forward, while he remained unchanged, forgotten. 2. The Boy with the Broken Kite. One crisp autumn afternoon, when the wind carried the scent of harvest, a small boy wandered into the field. His name was Leo, a quiet child with a head full of dreams too big for his tiny frame. In his hands, he clutched a red kite, its torn fabric fluttering in defeat. Leo's eyes widened as he saw the scarecrow standing amidst the sea of gold. He had passed by this field many times before, but never had he truly looked at the lonely figure that guarded it. With cautious steps, he approached. "You look lonely," he whispered, though he knew the scarecrow wouldn't answer. "I'm lonely too." The scarecrow, as always, said nothing. But something in the air shifted, a silent understanding, a fragile connection. Leo sat beside him, fixing his kite with careful fingers. The scarecrow could do nothing but watch, yet for the first time, he did not feel so alone. 3. The Seasons of Friendship. From that day on, Leo returned to the field often. He spoke to the scarecrow as though he were a friend, sharing stories of school, of his dreams to fly among the stars, of the loneliness that only a child could understand. And the scarecrow, though he could not speak, listened with all his being. When winter came and the fields lay bare beneath the snow, Leo still visited, wrapping an old scarf around the scarecrow's stiff shoulders. "It's cold," he murmured. "I don't want you to be cold." Spring followed, painting the land in hues of green, and Leo brought him flowers, tucking daisies into the scarecrow's straw hands. "Now you look happy," he said. In summer, he lay beneath the scarecrow's shadow, staring at the sky, tracing the shapes of clouds. "Do you ever wish you could move?" "Just once," he asked. And though there was no reply, he imagined the scarecrow nodding. The scarecrow had never known companionship before. He had never known the warmth of a friend's presence. But now, with Leo's visits, he felt something he could not name, something more than mere existence. 4. The Storm that changed everything. But time is a cruel thing. It moves forward even when one wishes to stay still. One evening, as summer began to wane, dark clouds rolled over the horizon. The wind howled through the fields, bending the wheat, carrying the scent of an angry storm. Leo was not there that day. He had been kept home by his mother, safe from the storm's wrath. The scarecrow, however, had no shelter. Lightning split the sky, and the rain fell in torrents. The scarecrow's straw body grew heavy, his wooden post groaning beneath the force of the wind. He had endured countless storms before, but this one felt different. This one felt final. A powerful gust of wind struck him, and with a great, sorrowful creak, he fell. For the first time, the scarecrow lay upon the earth he had watched for so long. He could see the wheat from a new perspective, feel the soil against his straw, smell the scent of rain-soaked earth. But he did not feel joy, only the ache of knowing he would never stand again. The goodbye that wasn't. The next morning, when the storm had passed and the fields glistened with the morning sun, Leo arrived. His breath caught in his throat when he saw the broken figure lying amidst the fallen wheat. Tears welled in his eyes as he knelt beside the scarecrow. "You're hurt," he whispered. "You can't leave me." His small hands tried to lift the scarecrow, but he was too heavy, too broken. Desperation filled Leo's chest, and he did the only thing he could. He sat beside his fallen friend and cried. Then, an idea formed. He ran back home, searching through his father's shed, gathering wood, rope, nails. And with the determination only a child could possess, he returned to the field and worked. By sundown, the scarecrow stood once more, not as he was before, but something new. His wooden post had been replaced, his straw restuffed, his hat placed gently upon his head. And around his neck, the scarf Leo had once given him remained, a reminder that he was not alone. Leo stepped back, smiling despite the tear tracks on his cheeks. "Now you can keep watching over me," he said. "And I'll keep coming back." The scarecrow, as always, did not answer. But in the rustling of the wheat, in the gentle sway of the breeze, a silent promise was made. 6. The Legend of the Field's Guardian. Years passed, and Leo grew. He no longer came as often, but the scarecrow remained, watching over the field with quiet patience. He had lost the boy's presence, but not the memories. And for a being who had once known only solitude, that was enough. As time wove its tapestry, others came to hear the story of the lonely scarecrow and the boy who loved him. Some claimed that on quiet evenings, if one listened closely, they could hear a voice carried by the wind, a voice that whispered stories of stars, of dreams, of a friendship that had once bloomed in a golden field. And so, though he never moved, never spoke, never changed, the scarecrow was never truly alone again. For he had once been loved. And that love would never fade. The Enchanted Manor, a tale of mystery and dreams. The sky above London was a canvas of mist and moonlight when Eleanor Whitmore received the letter that would change her life forever. Sealed with dark crimson wax, the envelope bore no return address, only her name inscribed in elegant, looping script. "Miss Whitmore, you are cordially invited to Thornfield Hall. Come before the next full moon. Your fate awaits." A thrill ran through Eleanor's veins. Thornfield Hall, an ancient estate nestled deep in the English countryside, shrouded in mystery and whispered legends. She had only heard of it in passing, a grand mansion abandoned for decades, its halls once echoing with laughter and now swallowed by silence. What business could she possibly have there? And who had sent the letter? Her heart pounded as she packed a modest trunk and boarded the midnight train bound for the unknown. The rhythmic chug of the locomotive lulled her into uneasy dreams of shadowed hallways, flickering candlelight, and a voice whispering her name from the darkness. The carriage ride from the train station was long, winding through rolling moors under the pale glow of the moon. A cold fog clung to the land, swirling like ghostly figures in the night. At last, as dawn threatened to break, Thornfield Hall emerged from the mist, a towering Gothic masterpiece, its ivy-clad facade looming like a secret waiting to be unraveled. A tall, slender butler named Mr. Alastair greeted her at the entrance, his silver eyes betraying no emotion. "Miss Whitmore, you are expected." Inside, the manor was a masterpiece frozen in time. Chandeliers dripped with crystal, their candlelight casting eerie patterns on the walls. Dusty portraits of unknown ancestors lined the grand staircase, their painted eyes seeming to watch her every move. But it was the music that caught Eleanor's breath. A soft, melancholy tune floated through the air, though the corridors were empty. The notes wove around her like invisible hands, beckoning her deeper into the house's secrets. Eleanor was led to her chambers, a lavish bedroom adorned with velvet drapes and antique furniture. Yet, something felt off. The mirror above the fireplace reflected a momentary flicker of movement, though she was alone. A faint laugh, barely audible, curled through the silence. Determined to uncover the truth, Eleanor roamed the halls that night, candle in hand. she traced the music to a grand parlor, where a forgotten piano stood untouched for years. As she approached, the air grew heavy, charged with something unseen. The keys pressed down of their own accord, playing the tune she had heard since her arrival. Then, in the moonlit reflection of the piano, she saw her. A young woman in a flowing ivory gown, her face half obscured by cascading curls. She gazed at Eleanor with eyes full of sorrow and longing before vanishing into the night's embrace. The next morning, Eleanor pressed Mr. Alastair for answers. His expression remained unreadable, but he finally spoke. "Miss Whitmore, there is something you must understand. Thornfield Hall does not belong to the living alone." With each passing day, Eleanor uncovered more. A hidden diary beneath the floorboard revealed the tragic story of Isabella Hawthorne, the woman in the mirror. Once the heir to Thornfield, Isabella had vanished on the night before her wedding, her disappearance shrouded in scandal. Some claimed she had run away. Others believed she had been taken by something lurking within the house itself. The more Eleanor read, the more she felt Isabella's presence, watching, guiding, pleading. The air in her chamber would turn ice cold without warning, her dreams filled with echoes of Isabella's final words, "Find me." On the night of the full moon, Eleanor followed the whispers to the western wing, a section of the manor long sealed away. A grand door, its carvings of roses and ravens weathered with age, stood before her. The key trembled in her hand as she turned it, and with a groan, the door creaked open. Beyond lay a forgotten ballroom, its grandeur lost to dust and decay. And at its center, beneath the moon's silvery glow, stood Isabella. But she was not alone. A shadowy figure loomed behind her, its shape shifting and unnatural, eyes burning like embers in the dark. Eleanor felt an invisible force wrap around her throat, the very walls groaning under its power. Through the suffocating weight of fear, Isabella's voice rang clear, "You must free me." With a burst of desperation, Eleanor grabbed the locket that had appeared on a nearby pedestal, Isabella's locket, hidden for decades. The moment her fingers closed around it, a blinding light erupted from within, shattering the darkness with its brilliance. The entity shrieked, its form twisting before dissipating into nothingness. The room fell silent, and Isabella turned to Eleanor, her spectral form softening into a peaceful glow. "Thank you," she whispered before fading like mist in the morning sun. When morning came, the air in Thornfield Hall was different, lighter, as though the house itself had been freed from its own sorrow. Eleanor knew she could not stay. She had done what she was meant to do. As she prepared to leave, Mr. Alastair bowed deeply. "The house remembers you now, Miss Whitmore. Should you ever return, its doors will always be open." She stepped outside, the golden dawn painting the manor in a new light. Thornfield Hall was still a place of secrets, but now, it was also a place of peace. As Eleanor boarded the train back to London, she clutched Isabella's locket to her chest, knowing she had not only uncovered a mystery but had given a lost soul its freedom. And in the depths of her heart, she knew this was only the beginning of her own story. But as the train pulled away from the station, Eleanor felt a cold breath on the nape of her neck. A whisper, faint and familiar, brushed against her ear, "You are not finished yet." The Windmill's Embrace, a tale of warmth and kindness. The windmill stood on the edge of a golden field, its wooden blades creaking rhythmically as the gentle breeze guided them through their endless dance. It had been there for over a century, perched atop a hill that overlooked the quaint village of Evermere, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the afternoon sun. The villagers called it the heart of Evermere, for it was more than just a mill, it was a home, a haven, and a place where kindness had long taken root. The caretaker of the windmill. Inside the windmill lived an elderly man named Theodore Langley. He had spent most of his life within its sturdy walls, maintaining the mill and grinding flour for the villagers. His hands were rough from years of labor, but his heart was as soft as freshly baked bread. Theodore had never married, nor had children of his own, but he had become a father figure to the village in ways that no one else could. Every morning, before the first rays of sunlight stretched across the sky, Theodore would wake and tend to the windmill. He would check the wooden beams, oil the gears, and ensure the blades were in good condition. Then, as the sun rose higher, he would make his way to the village, carrying sacks of flour in his wheelbarrow, distributing them to families who needed them most. But Theodore's kindness extended far beyond his flour. He was a storyteller, a friend, and a quiet guardian. He fixed broken fences, taught children how to mend fishing nets, and shared warm cups of tea with the lonely. His presence was a comforting constant in Evermere, a man who never asked for anything in return. A child in the rain. One autumn evening, as the wind howled and rain fell in heavy sheets, Theodore heard a knock at his door. He opened it to find a small, shivering figure standing on the doorstep, a boy, no older than 10, wrapped in a tattered cloak, his face streaked with raindrops and tears. Theodore knelt beside him, his voice gentle. "Come inside, lad. You're safe here." The boy hesitated, but the warmth emanating from within the windmill was too inviting to resist. He stepped inside, his small feet leaving muddy imprints on the wooden floor. Theodore wrapped a woolen blanket around him and led him to the fire, where a pot of stew simmered. "What's your name, son?" Theodore asked, offering the boy a bowl of stew. "Elias," the boy whispered, his voice hoarse from the cold. "Where is your family, Elias?" The boy hesitated, looking down at the steaming bowl in his hands. I don't have one anymore." Theodore's heart ached. He had seen sorrow in many forms over the years, but the weight of loneliness in a child's eyes was the heaviest of all. "Well then," Theodore said, his voice as steady as the turning windmill blades. "You have one now. A new life in the windmill." Elias stayed with Theodore from that day forward. At first, the boy was quiet, cautious. But the windmill had a way of softening even the hardest hearts. He watched as Theodore worked, asking questions about the gears and the sails. In time, he learned how to mend wooden beams, grind wheat into flour, and even tell stories by the fire just as Theodore did. The villagers welcomed Elias with open arms, knowing that if Theodore had taken him in, he was family to them as well. The boy grew stronger, his laughter ringing through the fields like music. He became Theodore's shadow, following him on morning flour deliveries, helping repair fishing boats, and even crafting small wooden toys for the village children. But more than anything, Elias learned about kindness, the quiet, unwavering kind that asked for nothing in return. He learned that love was not just found in blood ties, but in the warmth of a shared meal, in the patience of a guiding hand, and in the steady hum of a windmill that never ceased to turn. The passing of seasons. Years passed, and Elias grew into a fine young man. The windmill, once Theodore's alone, now belonged to both of them. The villagers often spoke of the pair, the old miller and his boy, two hearts bound not by birth, but by the love they had built together. One winter, Theodore fell ill. His once strong hands trembled, and the fire in his eyes dimmed. Elias refused to leave his side, tending to him just as Theodore had once tended to a shivering boy in the rain. "The windmill needs you now," Theodore murmured one evening, his voice weak but filled with pride. "And so does the village." Elias swallowed past the lump in his throat. "I'm not ready," he whispered. Theodore smiled, his fingers curling around Elias's hand. "You have been ready for years, my boy." That night, the old man passed peacefully, his hand still resting in Elias's. The village mourned him deeply, but they also celebrated the life he had lived, a life of quiet kindness, of steadfast love, of giving without asking. The windmill turns on. Elias took over the windmill, just as Theodore had known he would. He kept the traditions alive, grinding flour, helping the villagers, telling stories by the fire. And in the wind that rushed through the fields, in the rhythmic creaking of the windmill's blades, he felt Theodore's presence. But the story did not end there. The windmill became a place where the weary could rest, where lost souls found their way home. Elias took in others just as he had once been taken in, a young widow with a child, a wandering artist searching for inspiration, an old sailor with no place to call his own. And in each of them, Elias saw reflections of himself, echoes of the kindness that had been given to him. One summer, a girl arrived at the windmill, a traveler with bright eyes and a curious heart. She stayed longer than most, listening to Elias's stories and helping with the flour sacks. Over time, their bond deepened, and the windmill, which had once belonged to an old man and a lost boy, now became a home to a family once more. The windmill stood tall, unchanged yet ever moving, a symbol of love that had shaped the lives within it. And each time Elias welcomed a weary traveler or a lost child into its warmth, he knew Theodore's kindness had never truly left. It lived on, carried by the wind, whispered in the rustling fields, turning the windmill's blades for generations to come. The whale who searched for stars. The ocean stretched endlessly beneath the silver glow of the moon, its waves rippling like silk under the night sky. Somewhere in the vast expanse of the deep, where the water turned from sapphire to inky black, lived a great whale named Lyra. She was no ordinary whale, for within her heart burned a longing unlike any other, a longing to touch the stars. Ever since she was a calf, Lyra had been enchanted by the twinkling lights that speckled the sky. While other whales sang songs of the deep and followed the ancient currents, she would float on the surface, gazing upward in wonder. "Why do they shine so brightly?" she often asked her mother. "The stars are far beyond the ocean, little one," her mother would reply with a soft nuzzle. "They are mysteries meant for the sky, just as we are creatures of the sea." But Lyra was not satisfied with that answer. She believed that if she could just get close enough, she might be able to hold a star in her fins, to feel its warmth against her skin. And so, as the years passed, the dream grew within her, vast as the ocean itself. The journey begins. One evening, when the sea was calm and the moon was full, Lyra made a decision. She would find a way to reach the stars. She first sought wisdom from the oldest turtle in the ocean, an ancient being named Osric, whose shell was covered in barnacles and stories of time itself. "The stars, child?" Osric chuckled, his voice creaky like an old ship. "They are far beyond our reach. Even the tallest waves cannot kiss the sky." "But there must be a way," Lyra insisted. "If birds can fly toward them, why can't I?" The old turtle thought for a moment before answering. "Perhaps the winds hold your answer. Seek the albatross, the great traveler of the skies. If anyone knows the way to the stars, it will be him." And so, Lyra ventured beyond the familiar waters of her home, swimming toward the open sea where the winds danced freely. For days, she searched, calling out into the vastness, until at last, a shadow passed above her, a magnificent albatross, wings spread wide against the sky. The secrets of the sky. The albatross, whose name was Cedric, circled once before landing lightly upon Lyra's back. "You called for me?" he asked, tilting his head. "Yes," Lyra said eagerly. "I wish to reach the stars. Can you teach me how to fly?" Cedric let out a deep laugh, shaking his feathers. "A whale in the sky? That is a sight I would love to see. But I'm afraid our worlds are different, dear whale. My wings carry me upon the winds, while your fins carry you through the tides. The sky and sea are distant cousins, forever watching one another but never truly touching." Lyra's heart sank. "So there is no way?" The albatross hesitated, then looked toward the horizon. "There may be one who can help you. The sky whale." Lyra's eyes widened. "The sky whale?" Cedric nodded. "A legend among us travelers. They say he swims between the stars, carrying the light of the heavens upon his back. If anyone knows the path to the stars, it is him. But beware, for finding him is no easy task. He only appears when the ocean and sky become one." Chasing the horizon. Determined, Lyra set forth once again, this time in search of the sky whale. She traveled through shimmering coral gardens and vast trenches where the water grew dark and still. She swam alongside pods of dolphins who spoke in riddles and schools of fish that glittered like fallen stars. Days turned to weeks, and Lyra began to wonder if the sky whale was just a myth. But then, one evening, a storm came. The sea churned wildly, and the sky roared with thunder. Rain lashed the water's surface, and for a brief moment, the ocean and sky were no longer separate. It was in that moment that Lyra saw him. A great, luminous figure emerged from the storm clouds, a whale, vast and glowing, his body speckled with constellations. His deep, melodic song resonated through the sky and sea alike, and when his eyes met Lyra's, she felt as though she had known him forever. "You seek the stars, little one," the sky whale's voice was like 1,000 echoes of the wind and waves. Lyra nodded breathlessly. Yes. Please, tell me how to reach them. The sky whale regarded her with something like sorrow and something like pride. The stars cannot be caught, dear child, just as the tides cannot be held in one's fins. But that does not mean you cannot touch them. Lyra's heart pounded. How? The sky whale swam closer, his glowing tail sweeping through the air like a comet's trail. The stars are not just in the sky. They are in the laughter of the dolphins, in the glow of the jellyfish, in the way the moonlight kisses the waves. You have touched the stars every day, without knowing it. Lyra blinked, realization dawning upon her. All this time, she had been searching for something far away, not realizing it had surrounded her all along. The beauty, the light, the magic, she had carried it within her heart from the very start. The sky whale gave her a gentle nudge. Go now, little one, and share the light you have found. A star in the ocean. Lyra returned home, her heart no longer filled with longing but with something far greater, understanding. She no longer needed to chase the stars, for she had found them in the world around her. In the bioluminescent glow of the plankton that danced in the waves, in the golden sunrise spilling over the horizon, in the warmth of the currents that carried her home. And as she sang to the ocean that night, her voice rich and full of newfound joy, the other whales gathered around her, listening in awe. Her song carried across the waters, reaching creatures great and small, filling their hearts with wonder. Lyra had become a star herself, not one that shone in the sky, but one that lit up the ocean with dreams, with hope, with magic. And from that night on, whenever a young whale gazed at the stars in wonder, they would remember the tale of Lyra, the whale who searched for the stars, only to find that she had been among them all along. The cat's moonlight dream. The night was quiet, bathed in the silvery glow of the full moon. In a sleepy town where cobblestone streets twisted like old stories, there lived a cat named Lumi. She was a small, soft-furred creature with eyes as bright as the stars above, and she had always felt that the night held secrets only she could understand. Every evening, as the town drifted into slumber, Lumi would leap from her windowsill and wander through the moonlit streets. She was different from other cats, for she had a dream so strange and wonderful that even she could hardly believe it. Lumi wanted to reach the moon. She had spent many nights gazing at it from rooftops, wondering what lay beyond its glowing surface. Was it made of silver dust? Did stars dance upon it like fireflies? She had heard the wind whisper that the moon knew the dreams of all creatures, and if she could just reach it, she might finally understand the song that hummed in her heart each night. The Whispering Wind. One evening, as Lumi curled atop a lantern-lit bridge, she heard a voice drift through the wind. Little cat, why do you stare so longingly at the sky? Startled, she looked around but saw no one. Only the night stretched before her, gentle and endless. The wind laughed softly, swirling autumn leaves around her paws. If you wish to touch the moon, you must follow the path where dreams walk. Lumi's tail twitched with excitement. Where do dreams walk? She asked. In the place where the sky kisses the earth, the wind replied. Find the Dreamkeeper, and he shall show you the way. The Dreamkeeper. Lumi had never heard of such a being, but she had no doubt he existed. She had always believed that dreams were alive, breathing things, and if there was someone who guarded them, she needed to find him. The journey to the Dreamkeeper. Determined, Lumi set off through the quiet town. She padded past the bakery, where the scent of cooling bread lingered in the air. She slipped through the marketplace, where wooden stalls stood empty under the starlit sky. Finally, she reached the old oak tree at the heart of the town square, a tree so ancient it had seen the rise and fall of countless seasons. As she approached, she noticed something peculiar. The roots of the tree shimmered faintly, like threads of silver woven into the earth. The moment she stepped upon them, the world seemed to shift. The town faded, replaced by a vast field of glowing flowers that pulsed with light. The sky above her deepened into an infinite expanse, where stars hung closer, as if they were watching her journey with quiet curiosity. In the center of the field stood a peculiar figure, a tall, cloaked being whose robes rippled like mist in the moonlight. His face was hidden, but his voice was kind when he spoke. You seek the moon, little one? Lumi nodded, her heart thudding with excitement. Yes. Please, tell me how to reach it. The Dreamkeeper chuckled. Ah, but the moon is not a place one can simply walk to. It exists both near and far, within and beyond. But if you truly wish to touch it, you must first understand what it is you seek. Lumi tilted her head. I want to know if it holds the dreams of all creatures. If I listen closely, will I hear their wishes? The Dreamkeeper studied her for a long moment before finally saying, very well. To touch the moon, you must follow the moon path. But beware, it is a road woven from dreams, and not all dreams are kind. Walking the moon path. Lumi followed the Dreamkeeper's guidance, stepping onto a narrow, shimmering path that stretched into the sky. As soon as her paws touched it, she felt a strange sensation, weightlessness, as if she were drifting between waking and sleeping. The moon path was unlike anything she had ever seen. It twisted through clouds that smelled of lavender and wove between floating islands where memories flickered like lanterns. She saw a young boy dreaming of becoming a painter, his thoughts swirling into colors that painted themselves upon the air. She passed an old fox dreaming of a warm den, his longing shaping the clouds into rolling hills. But not all dreams were gentle. As she ventured farther, shadows crept along the edges of the path. Dreams tinged with fear and sorrow whispered around her, lost hopes, forgotten wishes. The path trembled beneath her paws, and for the first time, Lumi hesitated. A voice, soft but sorrowful, called out to her. Why do you seek the moon? Lumi turned to see a cat much like herself, but made of stardust. Its eyes held the weight of 1,000 forgotten dreams. I want to hear the dreams of others, Lumi answered. To know if they truly reach the moon. The stardust cat sighed. Then listen. And for the first time, Lumi truly listened. She heard the wishes of children hoping for love, the quiet prayers of those longing for peace. She heard the laughter of dreams fulfilled and the quiet echoes of those that had faded. The moon, she realized, did not simply hold dreams, it carried them, weaving them into the night so that they could dance forever in the sky. The moon's gift. As Lumi neared the end of the moon path, she saw it, the moon, vast and glowing, waiting just beyond her reach. But now, she no longer needed to touch it. She understood. The moon was not something to be claimed, but something to be felt. It was in the wishes carried by the wind, in the hopes whispered beneath its glow. It belonged not just to the sky, but to all who dreamed beneath it. The stardust cat smiled. You have found what you sought. Now, return and carry the moon's light wherever you go. Lumi closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she was back in the town square, curled beneath the old oak tree. The first hints of dawn painted the sky in soft hues of pink and blue, and the world felt quieter, as if it, too, had listened to the night's dreams. She stretched, feeling the weight of her journey settle within her heart. And as she padded home, she did not look at the moon with longing anymore, but with understanding. That night, as Lumi curled up on her windowsill, she let out a soft purr. The moon shone above, unchanged yet different, and she knew that its glow would always guide those who dared to dream. And in the quiet town where cobblestone streets twisted like old stories, a small cat named Lumi carried a piece of the moon within her heart, forever dreaming beneath its gentle light.